Here at Leigh Woodworking Tools, we continually strive to improve our products. The following video was produced for an earlier model of jig. However, the instructional content remains current for your D4R Pro. The finger assembly, scale, jig settings, and operating procedures for the D4R Pro are virtually identical to what you'll see here. Where there's a modification, the change has been clearly captioned.
With through dovetails, the pins fit in the pin sockets. The joints almost always end at each side with half pins. To create a simple square test box, you will need 5 identical boards, 3/4 of an inch by 5.5 inches by 8 inches long or similar size. 4 boards will be used to create the box. The 5th will be used for testing for fit. To start, mark the inside faces of the tail boards and the outside faces of the pin boards. Because we're using 3/4 inch thick boards, we use a router with a 7/16 inch outside diameter guide bush and a number 80 1/2 inch by 8 degree dovetail cutter and a number 140 5/16 inch straight cutter. Fit the 7/16 inch guide bush securely to the router. Fit the number 80 dovetail cutter to the router. Make up a spacer board as specified in the user guide and clamp it in the rear clamp. Place the finger assembly on the support brackets in the through dovetails pins mode. For initial adjustment, set the scale to the 1/2 inch setting. Always support the finger assembly with the spacer board when using the front clamp. Now clamp one of the pin boards in the left side of the front clamp against the side stop, with the top edge flush under and touching the guide fingers, and the outside face away from the jig body. Loosen the support bracket knobs and raise the finger assembly about 1/16 of an inch above the boards. This allows easy and accurate guide finger adjustment. Although you will cut the tails first, adjust the guide finger layout in the through dovetails pins mode, because it is easier to visualize the finished joint pattern. The adjustment screws are on top in this mode. The following joint design is only a suggestion for this trial. It has a typical and traditional symmetrical layout of pins with half pins at each edge. The outer guide finger next to the scale is there to support the router. Ignore it and loosen the next 8 guide fingers and slide them over the top of the workpiece. Lock the left half-pin guide finger about 1/8 of an inch in from the left edge of the board, and lock the right half-pin guide finger about 1/8 of an inch in from the right edge of the board. Judge this distance by eye. It doesn't need to be exact. The Leigh dovetail guide finger assembly will ensure that the sockets and pins align automatically. Space and lock the 3 remaining pairs. Again, judge by eye. If it looks right on the jig, the finished joint will look right. Tighten all loose guide fingers to ensure a flush, level guide surface. Always push down on the center of each guide finger when tightening the screws. Remove the pin board. Rotate the finger assembly to the through dovetail tails mode. Set the scale to the 1 inch position. All through dovetail tails are routed at this setting. Lower the finger assembly onto the spacer board. Now clamp the tail board vertically, touching the side stop, with the inside face of the board away from the jig. Place the end of a pin board horizontally and flush under the guide fingers. Now mark a thin pencil line partly across the tail board. Place the router on the finger assembly and adjust the router until the dovetail cutter tip is level with the center of the pencil line. Now route out the half pin and pin sockets. Release the clamp and reverse the tailboard in the jig, keeping the inside face away from the jig body. Route the other end of this tailboard and both ends of the second tailboard. Now rotate the finger assembly to the TD pins mode. Don't change the guide finger layout. The tightness of the finished joint is determined in the Through Dovetails pins mode. The further out towards the operator the finger assembly is set, the larger the pins will be. The further in towards the jig the assembly is set, the smaller the pins will be. Set the Through Dovetail pin scale 2 divisions above the half-inch reading. This should result in oversized pins for the first test. The dimensions in this triangular panel indicate the width of the pin to be routed. These dimensions match the size of the dovetail cutter used to route the tails. In this case, 1/2 inch.
So, set the Through Dovetail pin scale to the half-inch reading for the first test.
Clamp a test pin board against the left-hand side stop, outside face away from the jig, with the top end flush under the guides. Through Dovetail pins are the only boards on which the outside face faces out on the jig. Place the side edge of one of the cut tail boards flush under the guide fingers and mark a pencil line partway across the pin board. Unplug your router and remove the dovetail cutter. Replace it with a number 140 5/16 straight cutter. Place the router on the finger assembly and adjust the router until the cutter tip is level with the center of the pencil line. Route out the waste between the pins. Remove the test pin board and test it for fit in one of the previously cut tail boards. The joint will probably be too tight. If it is too tight, move the finger assembly away from you by 1 division on the scale. Replace the test piece and align it against the same side stop. Then route the sides of the pins again. Retest the fit. You can repeat this procedure, taking a bit more off each time until the fit is perfect.
If the joint is loose, pull the joint apart. The gap at the bottom of the pins is the distance you should move the finger assembly forward on the jig. Then route a fresh set of pins to test.
When the correct fit is achieved, mark the TD pin setting for future reference on the scale prints in your user guide. Now you can route all 4 ends of the pin boards, keeping the outside face outwards each time. Assemble the box with the inside of the tails inward and the outside of the pins outward. Any pin end will fit any tail end. The Leigh finger assembly ensures perfect alignment every time.